Hey, I'm Abby, and I'm really glad that you're here today. Recent survey data shows that about half of the people you and I interact with every single day feel satisfied in their friendships, which means the other half don't. If we're honest, relationships are complicated, and we're living in a time when navigating them feels trickier than ever. So if connection feels harder than it should, we're especially glad that you're here as we continue our series, Navigating Us. Now, before we jump into today's conversation, we'd love to help you take a simple step toward connection right now. Because real relationships don't just happen. They start with small, intentional moves. So first, we'd love to take a quick moment to connect with you. One of the easiest ways to do that is through our digital connection card. You can tell us a little bit about yourself, let us know if there's a next step that you're interested in taking, and share anything you'd like us to pray for. And if today is your first time with us, be sure to let us know that. We'd love to send a small gift in the mail this week. While we're talking about ways to connect, February 22nd, which if you're tuning in on Sunday is today, we are turning up the fun with a silent disco party, and there are still a few spots available to join the fun. If this is new to you, check this out. Bring your friends, family, neighbors, anybody, and come ready to dance, laugh, and make some great memories together. We'll provide everything you need. You just show up, get ready for what might be the most fun you have all winter long. There are 2 sessions to choose from, so pick the one that works best for you. And later that evening, we're hosting a special VIP silent disco just for our junior and senior high students. Students, you won't want to miss this. Speaking of junior high and senior high students, Sunday is also the final day to register for our Crosspoint Student Ministries Perfect North ski trip. Join us for a full day of skiing, snowboarding, or tubing. No matter your skill level, this is about hanging out, making memories, and bringing a friend along for the ride. Scan the QR code to let us know you're interested, and we'll see you on the slopes. Now, we love creating moments to gather and celebrate, but we know that not every season feels light. If you're grieving the loss of someone you love, these days can be especially hard, and you don't have to walk through them alone. I want to invite you to join us for Grief Share, a caring group offering practical guidance, encouragement, and people who truly understand. There's a new start date coming up in 2 weeks. I hope you'll check this out to learn more and register. And last, in 2 weekends, March 5th and 8th, we won't be meeting at the campus or online because the church is not just a time on the calendar or a place on the map. At Crosspoint, we're a movement of people seeking to connect people to a God who loves them, and part of how we do that is being expressions of love in our community. We'll be serving alongside local schools, nonprofits, and outreach partners in meaningful, family-friendly opportunities that bring hope and help where it's needed most. Here's a quick look at some of those opportunities from last year.
Our programs cannot run without volunteers, so to have your church come and dedicate this amount of hours and resources to help us pack bags helps get all of our work accomplished and ready to go so we can serve the kids.
As you can see, there are a variety of projects to jump into. Registration is open now, and we would love for you to be a part of it. Invite a friend, step into the mission, and join us as we live out our faith beyond our walls. All right, we've got a great service today. Before we hear from Curt, let's listen to a song that names the kind of friendship we're all craving, the kind that shows up when it counts. And maybe it's also an invitation to be that kind of friend ourselves.
Nothing is going right. you'll hear me knocking at your door. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running, running, yeah, yeah, to see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you have to do is call, and I'll be there. Yes, I will. Now ain't it good to know that you've got a friend when people can be so cold? They'll hurt you, yes, and desert you, and take your soul if you let them. But don't you let them. You just call out my name, and you know wherever I am, I'll come running, running, running to see you again. Winter, spring, summer, or fall, all you have to do is call, and I'll be there. Yes, I will. You've got a friend. You've got a friend. Ain't it good to know you've got a friend? Ain't it good to know? Ain't it good to know you've got a friend?
Wow, let's give it up for this band. Yeah, we all want a friend like that, right? Like we want a friend that's going to be there through every season. I mean, winter, spring, summer, fall. I mean, when it's raining, when it's storming, the sunny days. And studies show that about half of us have that, but we long for those moments. And so we're going to dig into this a bit tonight and kind of figure out, okay, how do we take our relationships to deeper places? So, hey, it's good to see you. Excited to be with you. My name's Curt. If you're here for the first time, welcome. Maybe you're returning. You came to game day a few weeks ago. Maybe you came for the beginning of the series last weekend. We're excited you're here. For those of you that are here every single weekend, always good to see you. And we got a whole bunch of our online crowd join us this weekend. Let's make some noise for them. Tuning in from, I don't know, maybe a bar next to a pool. Maybe you're in your bedroom, your kitchen, wherever you're tuning in from this weekend. Excited to have you with us. Now, we're in week 2 of the series, Navigating Us, and we're looking at how we have these different connections in life and the challenges that we find in making those connections. And each week, we're going to kind of look at a different relationship, whether it's spouse to spouse, or we're going to look in a few weeks at parent to child. We're going to look at friend to friend today. Next week, we're going to look at bridging relationships, how to connect with those that are different than us, and the importance of that. And each of these relationships has a unique challenge that just really makes it tricky to navigate. In fact, a recent survey by on American Life found that when it comes to friendship, less than half of men and 4 out of 10 women actually say they're satisfied with their friendships. Now, you don't need that data right there, right? Because for many of us, we feel that. We experience that every single day. And, depending on your life stage or your story, again, friendship just gets kind of trickier and trickier to navigate, it seems, the more we go through life. Now, I want to kind of set up what we're going to be talking about this weekend by telling a story about a time we had to navigate something. My wife and I, a few years ago, we went on a mission trip to Trinidad and Tobago, and we flew out of the city of Louisville. And so we don't usually fly out of Louisville, but for whatever reason, that's where we're flying out of. And so, it's about a 2-hour trip from Indianapolis. So we left super early. I gave ourselves like 6-7 hours to get there, and thought we had plenty of time. We get on the road, everything's going well. An hour or so out of town, there's a big accident, and everything on the highway comes to a standstill. And we lose about an hour just sitting. And then once traffic begins flowing, it's very slow. And then we find out there's some construction, and it's just creeping along. And this was, this is a number of years ago, before we had like the apps where you could see like if your flight's on time. I don't think in my whole life I've ever prayed for my flight to not be on time. This was one of those days I'm like, man, I don't know that we're going to make this. I don't know that we're going to make this flight. And so, we're slowly making our way toward Louisville. And, you hit like the bridge that goes across across the Ohio River, and there's a bit of a relief. We're like, okay, we might make this. And then we ran into more traffic. And, Louisville's unique because, you can't necessarily see the airport across the city, but you can kind of see it because you see the planes, taking off. And I just remember, we're getting close and we're praying. We're like, oh, surely, hopefully our flight will be delayed about half time. It seems like it is. And, I remember looking at my watch as we were getting close to getting off the interstate at the airport. And it was about the time our flight was supposed to leave. And, within a couple minutes, I see this Delta flight, taking off on the runway. And sure enough, that was our flight right there. We missed it. And it created all kinds of complications because we had multiple legs to our travels and so on. And it's like we were so close right there, and yet it seems so far away. There are many of those so close and yet so far away moments in life, right? Where you just feel like you're on track and you're clicking along, and then all of a sudden, you hit a snag or you hit a detour. And, and then, it takes sucks energy from us because, it's like, gosh, I thought I was almost there. And it just kind of, we just kind of decrease in our energy. And life is full of those moments, but I've also found that oftentimes our friendships are full of those moments as well. For instance, maybe you've had a friendship that you've been kind of working on and growing close to and, got to a really good place, and then all of a sudden you find out that friend is going to move. Or maybe you're the one doing the moving. Maybe you graduated, or maybe you took on a dream job and you're moving to a new community, and all of a sudden everything you've been building, it changes. Or, maybe it's not location changes, but maybe it's season changes. Somebody gets married, you become a parent, and all of a sudden those 10:30 Friday night poker games, it's like that doesn't work real well with the evening late night feedings, right? And so maybe it's the loss of a spouse, and all of a sudden you're looking for different kinds of connections. And it's hard because, sometimes it feels like we're starting over. Or, maybe, in your story, and again, these can be such painful moments, but, you feel like you were building up trust in someone, and, you felt like they had your back, and then all of a sudden they betray you in some way. And trust is kind of broken. Or you're in a small circle of friends or a small group, and you kind of put yourself out there vulnerably, but none of that vulnerability is reciprocated. Or perhaps you even have a difficult conversation you need to have with a friend or coworker, even maybe somebody you lead, somebody who works for you, and you feel like that. You hope that relationship is strong enough to bear the weight of that difficult conversation. Then you discover it really wasn't, and perhaps the trust wasn't there. There wasn't a receiving posture, and so these things just kind of come and they go. And so I saw something this last week. David Brooks, who's a New York Times best-selling author, he wrote the book, How to Know a Person. He was on a podcast recently, and he said, we are in the most rejected period of time ever, he believes, in the history of the world. Now, he was kind of making an argument for this. He's in his 60s, but one of the things he shared, he said, back when he went to college, 40 years ago, he said, I only applied to 1 or 2 schools, and I got into both of them. And I kind of felt the same way. I'm like, man, I applied to one, and I was so glad my 2.75 GPA carried me strong, and I got that acceptance letter because I only applied to one. But if you're a student today, you're applying to dozens of schools, and in many cases, you're getting all these rejections, and you hope you might get accepted at 1 or 2. Or maybe it's filling out job applications, and you're doing a lot of things electronically, and it just feels like those digital rejection emails just keep coming. Or perhaps it's in the online dating world. Rejection just hits in so many ways, and I think a lot of that actually can carry into our friendships. And our friendships can, as a result of that, become fragile. And we even keep people at arm's length because, and keep it kind of surfacey because, we don't want to get hurt, and we've had so much rejection, and we've tried this before, and then it's even hard to get the energy to keep trying. In fact, there was a great moment in one of the Ted Lasso episodes, and I want to show you that kind of shows just the difficulty that we have at times when we feel like trust in relationships has been violated. And so take a look at this scene right here. Wow, so much in that to unpack, and for many of us, there may have been a line in there that we just need to hear. Maybe it's just about belief in ourselves. As we think about today's talk, I think it's helpful for us to name the challenges that we have when it comes to our friendships right now. In fact, you might just think, what are some of the challenges that you face when it comes to taking relationships to a deeper place? Is it perhaps a life stage thing? Is it a life story? Maybe something you're carrying from, your history, your past? What makes friendships challenging for you right now? You know, my goal is not to dismiss any of that. In fact, sometimes I think we kind of think that friendship's kind of like a crapshoot. I mean, we just kind of luck into it. It's the roll of the dice. Sometimes it goes, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes we feel that way in life in general. Like, it's just like, you know, I hope it goes the way that you know, I need it to go. What I want us to consider today is that, you know, when it comes to friendship, perhaps we are more in control than we ever thought that we were. And there's certain things we can do to actually build deeper relationships, and, you know, through different seasons of life, you know, through different stages of life, and people who have done this and do this consistently and do this in healthy ways, there's certain things they do and they continue to do, and you and I can actually implement these as well. And so we're going to look at these today, and to kind of do this, we're going to look at the framework of this through a story in the Old Testament. And this is something that happened all the way back in 605 BC. All right, and we're going to get a picture of this inspiring group of friends as they kind of navigate a lot of the challenges of relationships in their world at the time. So we're going to start in Daniel chapter 1, and we're going to meet this group of friends. And here's kind of how the story starts right here. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put them the treasure in the house of his God. So real quick history lesson here. King Nebuchadnezzar, one of the most famous kings in history, probably learned about him in junior high, senior high history class. He built one of the largest empires ever, the Babylonian Empire. The capital city of the Babylonian Empire was Babylon, which is what we know today as modern-day Iraq. And the real Nebuchadnezzar, back in 605 BC, he actually started this whole initiative by trying to expand his territory. In fact, that's what the story here, the text tells us, is that he sets his eyes on Israel. Now, one of the unique things about this story is God was still in control. Even though the people of this time, they felt like, oh my gosh, everything's out of control. This isn't going the way we want. One of the meta-narratives of the Old Testament, really of the whole Bible, is this ongoing story of how God is in control. And are we willing, in the midst of things not being the way that we want or we perceive that they are we willing to actually trust God in those moments? And so a little more on the Old Testament, what's going on here in the Old Testament. God's working through these people known as Israel. And he was wanting to reveal himself to the whole world, and he was using this group to do that. But this group of people known as Israel kind of struggled following God. They wanted to follow their own, worship their own gods, follow their own ways. And God was like, hey, listen, I love you. I'm getting frustrated with you. I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to be with you. But there's some consequences, you know, for some of the things you're doing. And one of those consequences is that, like, I'm going to let a foreign power come in, and this is going to basically kind of cause you to go into exile. And so King Nebuchadnezzar comes to defeat the city of Jerusalem, and he takes stuff that Solomon put in the temple that was built for God, and he takes that stuff and puts it in his temple to his God. Not only does he take stuff, he also takes people. In fact, that's the next part of the story here. It says the king ordered Aspenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude in every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. So when King Nebuchadnezzar took over this territory, he had this real crude strategy. He didn't go in and demolish everything or enslave everyone. No, instead he said, I'm actually going to take out the best and the brightest. All right, I'm going to take the prettiest people. This was like Harvard meets Hollywood. That's what he did. He's like, I'm going to take the best looking people and I'm going to take them back to Babylon. I'm not going to torture them. He had a different strategy. In fact, here's what he did. He said he, meaning the head of the courts, was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table, and they were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. So basically, the king's like, hey, I'm going to give you a 3-year free ride, free room and board, everything, all expenses paid, all right? And we're not talking like cafeteria school food here, all right? They're going to be eating from the king's table, right? They're going to actually be sitting at the king's table. They're going to be in the circle of power. Now, I want us to put ourselves in the shoes of these young men, these young friends that are taken out of their hometown against their will. None of them wanted to be taken from their home. They're going on a strange journey. They're going into this strange world. They probably had images of like, hey, we're going to be enslaved. We're going to have to work our tails off the rest of our life in like hard labor. But no, they're actually put in the circle of power. They're actually brought into the main table. They have access to everything. I mean, they probably felt like, oh my gosh, it's like we won the lottery right here. Except there was a catch with the program that they were entered into. See, King Nebuchadnezzar, what he was basically doing, he was grooming them. This is a grooming program. All right, he was trying to strip away their identity. We see all kinds of pictures of this in our culture today. He was basically helping them become pro-Babylonian cheerleaders where they would just go along with whatever the king says. And so this is where we kind of meet this friend group in the context of this going on right here. All right, so they've been taken captive. They're put in the gifted and talented program, in essence. Here's what happens next. Saying among those who were chosen were some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, he called Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. Much like you and I today, they were navigating, these four guys were navigating a very, very tricky cultural situation. They had to decide what things they were going to stand up for, what things they were going to go to the mattresses for, what things they were, had high belief in, but they were just going to kind of let these things slide. And Daniel, one of the things he decides to worry about is this right here. It says next that Daniel resolved. That's a great phrase right there. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine. And he asked the chief official for permission to not defile himself in this way. Now, there's lots of different theories on why he did this right here with the food and wine. Some say, well, it was Babylonian food and wine, and he didn't want anything to do with that culture. Others say, no, he, this went against his dietary restrictions, which you and I don't have today, but back in that day, it was a really big deal. Whatever the reason was, Daniel said, I'm putting a stake in the ground right here. There's certain things that I'm just not going to cross the line on. And this was partly to say, hey, I want to show this Babylonian program, hey, you don't have control over me. All right? There's certain things God still has control over in my life. So in a very tangible way, I'm gonna put a stake in the ground and say, hey, God has control of this part of my life. Now, this is where Daniel's friends get involved. I want us to pay attention to this right here. All right? As he draws a line in the sand, because he makes an assumption that his friends that are going with him into this program are actually with him on this. All right, check what happens next. It says, Daniel then said to the guard to whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants, Daniel said, for 10 days. So he's basically like, hey, test us on this. And the guard is probably like, hey, I don't know that I want to be testing you guys on this. I don't want you to stop eating all this good food because, I'm in charge of you guys. I'm in charge of your health. All right, you start looking like nothing, you're good for nothing, all right? So Daniel's like, no, not only test me, notice what he says right here. He says, test us. He says, please test your servants for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So this friend group was so aligned, so tight, that when Daniel took a stand, he knew his guys were going to stand with him. All right, he knew it's like, hey, you mess with me, you're going to mess with all of us. Now, this may speak a little bit to how my mind works, but when I read this story, you know what I think of right here? My mind goes to like 7th grade humor, and I think of this guy right here. I think Adam Sandler and his like Grown-Ups crew. You know what I'm talking about? Like these guys, these are like friends for life, right? If you've ever watched Grown-Ups, these guys are like, hey, we're in it, man. You mess with one, you mess with all of us, right? Like these guys, even in real life, like they are in it thick with each other. All right, and so that's kind of what's going on with Daniel right here and his friends. And they show this resolve, and when they do this, God actually shows up. In fact, take a look at what happens next. It says, so he, meaning the guard, agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who had ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables and said, he's like, hey, you want to do it your way? That's fine. Worship your God. Do your thing. I don't care. All right, you look good. These 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding and all kinds of literature and learning. This is a special group of friends right here, and certainly God was doing some kind of amazing things in them, but it didn't end right here. It continued on. This group of friends would go through a lot. In fact, King Nebuchadnezzar, he would eventually put them in power and give them authority over certain things, and he would get frustrated with them because they weren't bowing down to him as a king. They were still worshiping their God. And some of you may be, familiar with the whole fiery furnace moment with like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, or as we used to say as kids, to bed we go. Anybody say that? Like you'd be like Shadrach, Meshach, and to bed we go. That's how we always said it in Sunday school. If you went to Sunday school, which I know not all of us did, you may be familiar with this story, but it's not just like that God shows up when they are being threatened to go into the fiery furnace. There's this whole miracle there that's really, really cool. But the part of the story I love the most is that, this friend group, they have some resolve. They basically say to the king, hey, listen, King Nebuchadnezzar, you can throw us in this fiery furnace if you want. It's not going to change our minds. We're not going to worship, you or your God, because we believe our God's going to show up and rescue us. And even if he doesn't show up, we're still not going to do it. That's resolve right there. And that's powerful. And if you're like me, sometimes you hear these stories and you look at this picture like this, you go, oh my gosh, I want people like that in my life. I want people who show up like that. I mean, not all the cultural, acculturation, all that kind of stuff, or the going in the fiery furnace, but I want people that are there, right? I want that kind of closeness, which kind of begs the question, okay, so how do we do that? How did they get so close? What was the process? See, what was it about this friend group that when they did this big thing, like they leaned in and they had each other's backs? The text gives us some hints and clues. We can speculate a bit, which we'll do. But I think it gives us some leads on how we can approach our friendships today. The couple things we know is this circle of friends. They were a bunch of young guys, 13 to 17 years old. That's pretty young. All right, they were the best and the brightest. They're putting this gifted and talented program. My speculation is, though, that they weren't necessarily friends originally. They're rivals, because usually people that want to be the best, they're competing. They're like, hey, I want to be the valedictorian, right? I want to be the most popular among the girls. So they were like the cream of the crop. And just to put it into context, they were taken away out of their culture. They were taken 1,000 miles away from Jerusalem to Babylon. That's 1,000 miles. That would have been like a 4 or 5 month journey on foot. Very, very difficult journey. And just to be clear, this wasn't a part of their plan. This is like a major life detour for them, right? Nobody had this in their plans. Their dreams were dashed, right? Because they're being put into this difficult grooming program. But it was actually in the midst of these difficulties that they forged, and some of those deep bonds were cemented. And sometimes we look at those things that are cemented in friend circles and we go, oh my gosh, I want that. Sometimes we don't realize, though, what it took and what people went through to actually get to that place. I actually had a conversation like this with a friend of mine recently. We were talking, he's newer to Crosspoint, not real new, but wasn't with us back in the school days, as I know many of you weren't. And he was like, man, I just love some of the stories I hear about, some of the moments when you guys were meeting in the school and God would show up and you thought, he'd led you to this, and then it's like that got shut down, and then you're waiting, okay, God, what's next? And then God shows you, hey, here's some land for you, and just there's all these key moments that Crosspoint's had throughout our history, even up to the last year and a half, 2 years. I'm going to give a little color on one that happened in a few minutes just a few years ago. But those are cool moments looking back. In the midst of them, they're difficult. But his comment was, man, there's such a bond with those that were a part of that. I wish I was a part of that. I'm like, well, dude, it was cool. I mean, it was cool, but man, it was hard too. Those were some hard times. And see, sometimes I think many of us, we're kind of waiting for the perfect moment for friendship to happen. We're waiting for the perfect season. I think what Daniel would say, he'd be like, hey, there's no perfect season, right? It's often in the imperfections of life. It's often in the imperfections of our story that those deeper bonds are actually cemented. And see, that was Daniel's experience, and it didn't just happen. All right, he had to be intentional about some things, but it just shows us we have agency. We actually have some control. Even when Daniel and his friends were taking on this 1,000-mile detour, they had agency to respond, based on certain things that took them on the journey they went on. And there was a bonding that took place in the midst of that. So I want to kind of pull out 3 things real quick out of this, 3 kind of quick hitters that definitive friendships have, because definitive friendships require definition. All right, it's important for us to bring clarity to them. And we see this in the life of Daniel. We see 3 things that we can kind of bring out of his story that I actually think you and I can actually apply to some of the difficult things we're navigating today as we think about how to take friendships to a different level. So the first one is this. The first one is called definitive values. That's what we're going to call it. That's my me-emoji right there. You like my me-emoji right there? How cool is that? That's like, hey, we need to have a circle where we kind of are with people that have similar values. We define those values. all right? Because listen, Daniel and his friends, they did this. They're going into this strange culture of Babylon, all right? They kind of had to pre-decide. I don't think they waited till they got there. I think they pre-decided kind of, how are we going to progress through this? How are we going to be purposeful in the midst of this, all right? They didn't fight or flight, all right? They didn't do that. They had to decide ahead of time, okay, how are we going to engage? What are we going to say yes to? What are we going to say no to? And see, this is important for you and I as well. In fact, I just think this is something we have to do with every new season of life we go through. You know, maybe you just graduated and you're like, okay, I'm in a new season. This is a good season to define, okay, what are my values for this season? Or, you know, maybe you just, began a new season as a parent, or moved to a new community, or you're an empty nester now and you're like, okay, there's a whole new season. What are the values that I really am looking for? How do I track with people that have similar values? Because at the end of that season, you want to look back and go, well, gosh, I feel good about kind of where I was and the people I'm traveling with. And so we have to define these values for ourselves. And we have to look for people that have those shared values. Because here's the thing, if you don't do that, I can tell you the people around you, your friends, they're going to try to tell you what your values are. Your family even might say, hey, here's what you need to value. Even the culture around us is going to say, here's your value. And so identifying our values and saying, okay, who are people that I can journey in the same direction with? When we do this, we begin to go to those deeper places. But friendship doesn't just happen there. There's something else we have to do. Second thing that we see in this story is we have to have definitive conversations. See, Daniel, I believe, and his friends had conversations about how they were going to stick together when they went through this really, really difficult season. I mean, I'm sure it happened when they were on this 1,000-mile journey. I mean, it took them months to get from Jerusalem to Babylon. I'm sure they were going, okay, we don't know what's going to happen when we get there. All right, here's how we're going to do this together. All right, I have a feeling before Daniel ever showed his resolve in front of that court leader, I believe that he and his friends talked through this, that they resolved hey, we're going to stick together. And one of the reasons I say that is his friends didn't go, whoa, Daniel, what did you just commit to? I mean, when Daniel pretty much told the court attendant, hey, we're going to pass on the filet mignon, we want celery instead. Think about that for a moment. No, none of his friends were like, dude, what are you doing? No, they actually went with him. I mentioned, we've had all these definitive seasons at Crosspoint over the years. Really cool moments. Again, looking back on them, we had another one about a year and a half, 2 years ago. If you've been around here for that length of time, you remember that. It was kind of shaped as we're coming out of COVID and rebuilding out of COVID and rebuilding financially. And, in the midst of that, I had to do a refinance on our building. And it was a very difficult interest rate season. We weren't even sure how all that was going to work, and even if there were options, even if we had a future. I mean, we did a lot of praying, a lot of rallying around. Many people. I mean, if you're newer here, you just need to know the grit of this community that's continued to say, hey, we're committed to creating a place for people that they can have a church with dim lights, easy exits, tune in online where you can, if you don't know where to start in faith, this is a place you can do that. There's not many of those kinds of places, in our community. We're just ultra committed to that. But, we didn't know if we were going to have a future. And my wife and I remember having some conversations with some of our close friends, some of our team, some of our advisors, where we just said, hey, are we crazy to push through this? Because we really can't see a future here. And, in our, some of the questions that came back were well, why are you doing this? What are the values that you have? Why would you commit to that? And we're well, because we have a commitment to people and we care for our community. We want to see people who don't currently see that God's relevant to their life, see that God's relevant. And we care about all these people that are here that might not find a place. And they looked at us and they said, no, you'd actually be crazy and we'd be shocked if you didn't go through with it. You see, that was a real defining conversation right there. Those are crucial conversations. Partly because we knew the road would be challenging. And we didn't want to assume that everybody was in the same place, but see, definitive friendships require definitive conversations. It's what it requires to go to different levels. One of the questions that, I want us to think through is, what is it we're trying to do together? What is it we're trying to do together? In my men's small group, we have similar conversations. It's easy when guys get together to sometimes just talk sports and shoot the breeze about things that, just normal things. But in my men's small group, we've just all kind of said, hey, we want to talk about things that matter. We'll do that. But we want to have definitive conversations. We want to talk about, where we're struggling or where God's showing up or something we're maybe just needing some encouragement on, because that's actually the places that we go to deeper places. We say, what is it we're trying to do? We're trying to encourage one another. We're trying to go and journey to deeper places with one another. See, Daniel does this. It revolutionizes their connection. And then the last thing we see Daniel do is, another way he defines friendship is he embraces definitive opportunities. Now we're back to my memoji here. So he's got one foot in definitive values, a circle of people that have similar values heading the same way, but he's also got a foot, in a circle that's like, hey, what are the new opportunities that are in front of me? We'll talk more about that in just a moment. See, one of the things I love about Daniel's group is they were open, even though this season was a massive detour. They could have shut it down. They could have been like, oh man, we're not looking for new opportunities. We're trying to just figure out life right here. But they didn't. They continued to look for opportunities of what God was doing and how God wanted to use them and people around them. And let me just remind us, we're talking about a group of teenagers right here. And we're still talking about them 2,600 years later, which means if you're a teenager, like take note of that right there. All right, your age doesn't define you. Man, when God calls you to a moment and you step up and meet that moment, I mean, there's pretty amazing things. You can actually create massive change. See, the best friendship circles are not cliques. All right, and we all know that, right? Like nobody wants to be in a clique, but one of the things I've discovered is over time, our friendship circles naturally become cliques. Even though we don't really become aware of it, but they just naturally become insider groups. The best friendship circles are actually outward focused. So here's my memoji again. So we need to have one foot in a circle with people that are headed in the same direction. We need to have our other foot in a circle with people who are new and outward focused. Who are the people that perhaps God's putting in front of me to connect with? And see, it was their openness that actually bonded them and created some pretty strange and amazing things in a powerful way. Now, your and my context is different than Daniel's. He was facing different things than you and I do. But we have significant opportunities in front of us. We have opportunities in our friend circles to actually rise up and meet some of the challenges that are going on all around us. Or we have the opportunity to step away from them. Last week we looked at one of the ways that relationships bond is when we have a shared mission. Around what God's doing and what we're called to be a part of. And that's one of the cool things about being a part of a church is we have this shared mission. And I want to circle back around to kind of where we started, this talk at. And that's one of the things that our culture around us presents to us. David Brooks, he said this phrase. He said, we're in one of the most rejected periods of time, ever. I want you to ask yourself, what would it look like for you and I in our friends group to kind of rise up and meet that moment right there? To be intentional, to include people that perhaps are outside of our current circle. See, this is where this gets pretty personal for me because I've had a lot of moments where I didn't necessarily belong, but people included me in their circle and I didn't really know why. And I can go all the way back to college. In fact, last weekend I talked about one of my good friends, Angelo, who serves out at our coffee bar here. And we've been doing ministry together for like 30 years, doing mission projects, all kinds of things. We have a lot of shared history. But, when we were at school together, he was older than me. He included me in his circle, and he didn't have to. But he invited me in. And introduced me to some other guys. There's another guy that was a little older than me from my hometown that went to the university I went to, and he included me in his circles and with his roommates, and they invited me to their apartment, and we played intramurals together, and we'd hang out and talk about spiritual things and relationships together. It's pretty cool. I even met my wife through this network of relationships. Little did I know it would turn into, my marriage, going 30 years strong. And so that friend circle was very, very impactful for me, but they included me, and they didn't have to. There's no reason that they needed to invite me in. But kind of coming full circle, something really cool happened about a month and a half ago. One of the guys in that circle that included me, he lives in this area. I hadn't seen him in 5 or 6 years. He reached out to me back in mid-December and he said, hey, Curt, I'm going through kind of a difficult season, and I saw some of the reels from your church on social media, and there's some stuff that really landed with me, and I just want to connect. I want to get together and talk because, I just think, God's kind of leading me to just connect with you. And so we got together at coffee, and as we were connecting, I said, you know what, I think you actually need a group of guys, and invited him to join the group that I'm in, and included him in my circle, and he's been connecting with this group, and it's been so cool because it's been so life-giving to him. And he's been life-giving to the group. See, this is what you and I get to do. And sometimes we're like, well, I got good friends, and when we've got a circle, it's easy to hunker down, and we even go to scarcity mode. We're like, oh my gosh, I only got so much friendship to go around. But perhaps God is inviting us to say, okay, who do I need to include in those circles? To meet that opportunity of like living in one of the most rejected cultures in the history of the world ever, with an openness and the love and the grace that Jesus extended to us. We say, hey, I want to give you an opportunity to come in. And I know for some of us, you're like, I don't know if I have anything to offer in that front, Curt. Well, you actually might have a lot more to offer than you think you do. See, when we open our lives in this way, just like Daniel, some pretty amazing things begin to happen. As we kind of close, I want to take us back to this idea that I think every new season that we enter into is an opportunity to redefine what our friendships look like. And it starts with redefining who we are and what we're looking for, and saying, okay, who are perhaps some new people that I want to journey with, people that are in the same lane, headed in the same direction, who are some of the people with the same values. Maybe it means redefining some of my current relationships. This is one of our next steps this week, and maybe for some of us it's saying, hey, having a 15, 20-minute conversation with a friend and saying, I feel like things have gotten kind of stale. We don't have a lot of purpose. Maybe we could bring a little more purpose. We got a little cliquish. Maybe we could steal a phrase from Daniel and say, what would it look like to show some relational resolve this week? Maybe that's even like jumping into a small group. A group of people spiritually heading in the same direction. Maybe that doesn't seem comfortable to you, but it's taking that awkward step to start meeting with people. I want to show you kind of how this works. We have a whole bunch of stuff happening around here, and I want to kind of just give you a visual of like how some of these connections take place. So we got things like silent disco, Churches Left the Building coming up, Grief Share, Crosspoint Sports, pickleball. You're not going to go and make a best friend probably at one of these events, but these are connection events. If you're newer to our community, this is where you're going to meet somebody, or if you've been around our community, you're like, man, my circle's a little stale. This is where you can go and interact, meet some new people. But as a result of that, you might meet someone and as a result go, gosh, I really like hanging with you. And you might actually get an invite to, that person might say, hey, gosh, you ought to come to my men's group. You ought to come to my women's group. You ought to come to my small group. We have a group of people. I think you'd really dig it. And you go, I think I will. I've never really wanted to do that, but you seem normal. I like you. You seem like a normal person. And all of a sudden you get connected at a little deeper level. But see, just showing up at a group doesn't always create that deeper friendship, but oftentimes within that deeper group, when you talk about meaningful things and spiritual things, it actually takes you to places where deeper friendships begin to emerge. In fact, it happened this week in one of my groups. I had a couple guys who were like, hey, we're meeting for coffee this week because, I want to connect with you. They're connecting at deeper levels. See, this is what happens when we expand, and maybe for some of us, like we need to take a step into some of these events so we can create some connection, put ourselves in a place where we can begin to broaden that relationship. Maybe for some of us who have been around it for a while, we need to enter that context and say, okay, how do I expand some of my circles? They've got a little stale. How do I include a few new faces? Whatever it is, I want to encourage this week to resolve to relate like Jesus did. In this rejection culture that's going on all around us, what would it look like for us to kind of be open-armed and just say, hey, I'm gonna be open with the love and grace just like Jesus did for me? Because I think that's one of the greatest things perhaps our culture all around us is looking for. In fact, I want to pray for us kind of as we think about what this means for us. Let's bow our heads. God, thank you for the chance to talk about things that matter. And last week we said, even as we think about relationships, the most important relationship we can have is with you. And the kind of connection you want isn't just as a father or as a leader, but like you actually call yourself friend, which I think is one of the reasons that Jesus, took the initiative to kind of go on our behalf to close the gap between you and us and do something for us that we couldn't do, because he realized that like we need that deeper spiritual connection with you, but there's nothing we can do in and of our own self to make that happen. And for some of us here today, our next step might just be receiving that invitation. Your invitation's always been, hey, let's just walk together. Let's go together. Let's do this thing called life together. And maybe for some of us today, we're here and we're realizing, man, I need that. I need to start walking. And because of what Jesus did, I can actually do that. I can have access to the Father by simply receiving his grace and his goodness and beginning a relationship and telling him, God, I want a relationship with you because of what Jesus did for me. And I just want to tell you that if you're at the place of taking that step, I just want you to know, man, it's one of the best decisions you'll ever make. God will never walk away from you. He'll always have your back in that moment. This is also a moment for us to think about our human relationships. And God, I just pray that our connection would reflect who you are. Help us to know what to do with what you've maybe nudged us on today. That we would be reflective of your grace and goodness with people around us. God, give us the relational courage this week the relational resolve like Daniel. Help us to maybe step out, to have the energy, to maybe create some new connections, to maybe have the conversation with our current set of friends, say, hey, it's gotten a little stale. What can we do to take this to a different place? And to actually talk about things that really we need. So God, would you ramp up those connections in our lives? Again, thank you for creating us for these. And we believe you want this for us. And we thank you. We love you. Amen. As we close, we're going to do a song. I want you to go ahead and stand. And as the band leads in this song, there's a really cool line I'm going to show you in a moment. But I know for some of us, relationships are hard because we've got a lot of baggage, and sometimes we're afraid to let people in. And I had a breakthrough moment about 20 years ago. I was actually had the opportunity to serve on a team with my dad and my grandfather. They were both pastors, and my grandfather's kind of in retirement age. It's very unique, lots of fun, love them both. But we all have outages, right? And so I asked the question one day. My grandfather passed about 2 years ago, but it was such a special time to serve with him. I asked the question one day. I said, hey, who do you connect deeper with at the deeper places? I just asked our whole team that. And I'll never forget my grandfather. He'd been in ministry for years. He kind of slammed his fist on the table. He's a very loving man, but he's like, one time, I shared something really vulnerable with somebody, and man, they told a whole bunch of people about it. And I decided I'd never, ever do that in my life again. It's like, wow, ding, ding, ding. This explains. I had struggled to have modeled what it meant to have deeper relationships, and I realized, oh my gosh, because of that one really painful moment, perhaps this set off generationally a difficulty connecting. And there were some breakthroughs in that moment, and for me personally. And maybe this is a moment for you to say, okay, there's been some stuff, but I'm gonna trust you, God. This song we're gonna sing, it kind of says, here I am, God, arms wide open. I'm gonna trust you. I'm gonna pour my life out. I'm gracefully broken. We're all broken. But look at this next word, this next phrase. When we do that, your power at work in me, I'm broken gracefully. I'm strong. You're strong. I'm strong when I am weak. And here's the result. We're free. So as we sing this, I just really believe God wants to do some breakthrough and even some healing as we lean into this moment and think about how do we go to those deeper places this week in our relationships. So let's sing with Morgan and the band.
Your mighty love stands
Hey, your experience doesn't have to stop here. There are plenty of ways to connect. We mentioned several earlier, like pickleball open play, silent disco, grief share, and our church has left the building weekend. These aren't just events. They're opportunities to meet people, build friendships, and discover what new relationships might begin. So before you move on with your day, I want to encourage you to pick just one, to show up, take one step, and see how God might open the door to something new. You never know how one step might start something amazing. We hope to see you there. Now, to those of you who are givers around this place, you are awesome. I want to say thank you. None of this happens without your generosity through the Joy Box. And if you're not a giver, but you'd like to become one, you can donate at this QR code and know that your gifts are what help fuel all the goodness that comes out of this place, including many of the opportunities you have to connect and grow around here, plus this online broadcast. And last, if you'd like someone to pray with you today, we would love to do that. You can text the keyword need prayer to 317-834-7373, and our prayer team will be in touch with you later today. Thanks so much for joining us. We can't wait to see you next weekend for part 3 of Navigating Us.